would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real Estate Realities with the Rebel Broker. My name's Robert Whiteline. I am the Rebel Broker, licensed real estate broker in the state of California, member of the National Association of Realtors. But please, don't hold that against me. Welcome to Thursday, November 3rd, 2016. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel of the week, folks. I hope everything is going well with you and your goals. I thought it might be good to check in relating to the technology that you can use that can help you with your real estate investing. So we'll do that a little bit today. We'll see how long that takes us. Before we jump into that, though, the best way to reach me is to head on over to therebelbroker.com. From there, you can click on Contact the Rebel Broker to send me a message, or you can click on Take the Survey to support the show, and that will be a way for you not only to help the show out and answer some demographic survey questions, but it will also enter you for a chance to win a $50 Amazon.com gift card. And I would like to congratulate Phil, who is our winner of November's $50 Amazon gift card. Now, this is the second month in a row that we've managed to give away $50, so $100 so far. I want to thank everyone who's been participating in the survey. When you do participate in the survey, just use the same email address both times you're asked for it. And as long as you do that, you are successfully entered. And of course, answer the other questions. You are successfully entered into the drawing for the $50. So good luck to all of you. And I look forward to seeing everyone getting in there and hopefully winning $50. In addition, you can also take a minute out to support the show. Now, what's great is there's a way to support the show doing things you would do anyway. A couple of ways to do that is at the website. You can head on over to what is still currently called the store. That's going to change to support the show, and then under that will be an Amazon store, and then there'll be a sponsors page. But you can go there, and if you're going to do some shopping on Amazon, use that. And you're not going to pay any more than you normally would on Amazon, but you'll be supporting the show by giving a little bit of the proceeds that you're spending to the show. And then, of course, on the sponsors page, when that's up, current sponsors or current partnerships that I have going on with other vendors out there will be available. So that if you're going to take advantage of those things anyway, you may as well do it through my site. So that way you're helping the show grow and deliver more awesome content. Also, if you'd like to become a member of the Rebel Underground, you can simply text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222. That's text the word Rebel Broker to 44222. And those folks will get access early to different content or get access to content that will only be available to that group, plus a lot of other very cool stuff. And then finally, in the effort to deliver more content, I mentioned that after my first failed attempt to get the technology to work to deliver what I want to deliver for you all in terms of providing a video of how to work with different tools to find good investment properties and then doing an analysis on a specific property, that's going to be moving forward. I've got some time put aside this week to see how far I can get. So hopefully that's going to happen relatively soon. And when it's all done, I'm not sure where it'll go. I don't know if it'll go just to the website as an exclusive or if I'll go ahead and put it up on YouTube. I'm leaning more towards YouTube. I'd like to get it in front of as many folks as possible. But we'll keep an eye out for that because that's definitely going to be coming down the pike here in the next, if not the next few days, the next week or so. It really isn't going to depend on the learning curve on getting this thing put together for you. So I'm kind of learning as I go on putting some of this stuff together. All right. So, sort of on that subject, I guess, since we're talking about technology, and clearly I'm leveraging off of technology as much as I can to deliver this content for you, I thought it might be helpful to share what I use in terms of technology to make things easier, to make it so that I'm not constantly covering the same ground over and over again or making a note of something and forgetting about it. Now, I'm pretty much a Mac guy. I have been for a very long time. I also do have a Windows machine. So I've done both. I've had, different smartphones. I keep coming back to the Mac setup, and right now the biggest advantage for me in terms of that stuff is being able to pretty much do something on one device and have it get inherited to all my devices. So if I do something with photos or with an analysis or anything on my iPhone, it's pretty much available on all my other devices. So if I sit down with my laptop upstairs while I'm relaxing, but doing a little work while I'm relaxing, or if I actually go all the way to my desk and sit down at the desktop computer, I've got it all there. I don't have to jump through any funky hoops to get things from one place to another. There's different tools that I use for that. Now, right out of the box, you're going to find that you can use iCloud to do most of this stuff in terms of syncing things up, whether you're syncing up contacts or you're syncing up files. All of those sorts of things are very easily synced between all your various devices as long as you log into the same iCloud account on each one of them. So good examples are if I'm out looking in different neighborhoods and I see properties that I like, I'll usually take a couple of photos of them. And what's great about that is it also geotags it. So I also get the address, or at least very close to it, as a really quick way to just sort of make note of what I'm looking at. And sometimes it's strategies we've talked about before, where I might take a shot of a property that isn't even actually listed for sale or doesn't have a sign in front of it, but looks like it may be vacant, for instance. And then I can go home and do a search using my real estate tools and figure out the mailing address of the owner, and I might send that person a note asking that they're interested in selling the property, that type of thing. In terms of just analyzing the area, there's excellent applications that you can use. The Realtor app, I don't mean the one that's exclusive to realtors. I mean the one you can download from the Apple Store for Realtor.com. That is not exclusive to the iPhone. It's not just an iOS app. They've also got them for Android. So you can go and download either one of those, depending on the device you have, and you can do some very interesting searches. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to find the same types of properties, or you're going to find the same properties that you'd find if you had access to the MLS, because Realtor.com is pulling all that data from the MLS. Now, all the other apps you could use, the Trulia app, the Zillow app, the Redfin app, those also pull from the multiple listing service, which is what Realtor.com is directly plugged into. So the Realtor.com site is really the primary place where that data comes from, and Zillow and all the other folks are just drawing data from that. So I tend to use the Realtor.com app. It's just easier. There's no real estate agent specific app other than really going onto the website and searching the multiple listing service that really only realtors can do. But you actually get more data. They've really gone above and beyond with many of these apps to find out what you want to know. And again, these are all things you don't necessarily have to be. If you're out driving around, great. You can tell the Realtor app to search the area around you. You can draw with your finger the area that you want to search. Now, as I mentioned, I'm going to be able to walk you through a lot of this stuff with the video series I'm going to plan on doing. And just, I know I don't want to go back and talk more about that, but maybe just to give you an idea of the fact that it's not going to be one super long video. At this point, it's going to be at least 2 videos, one about maybe just getting an initial assessment of a property when you're looking in your own area, then maybe another video on doing an assessment when you're not within driving distance, and then another video on doing a nitty-gritty, down and dirty, detail-oriented assessment of the cost of having a property in terms of deciding whether or not you're going to have it be something for rental and determine if it's positive cash flow, or whether or not the math makes more sense for you to do it as a flip and then resell. So for me, the idea of being able to be mobile, so there's just some of the apps that I use just aren't on, or that I want to use, that give me the detail I want or the ability to manipulate what I'm looking at, is much better on a desktop app than on the iOS devices. So having that ability to have everything transfer from one to the other is fantastic. That doesn't even start getting into the not real estate specific stuff. If you start talking about calendars, now this is going to be a little bit more easy to do if you're on an Android, because you can set up a Google Calendar that you can clearly make great use of on Android. And as long as you're subscribed to that calendar on all your devices, you could have a mix of devices. You could have iPhones, Androids, Mac desktops, Windows desktops, and have them all subscribe to that same calendar on Google. And then when you update it on any one of those devices, you'll see it on all of your calendars. For me, that's huge. And not just for real estate stuff. I'll frequently schedule times to look at homes and do other types of things. And so that makes it extremely easy. But also just scheduling anything else, right? Whether it relates to the show or an interview I want to try to put together with the show, those types of things. The calendaring part of it is amazing and totally keeps me on track. And I actually use Google Calendar for that. There's a specific app, and I've mentioned this before. It lets you easily track your goals. So you can set a goal in there, and you tell it in more general terms when are good times for you to do that. And if you add an appointment or something that conflicts with a goal that you've scheduled, that goal will automatically reschedule itself to the next time you have open that you predefined as an acceptable time for that to get pushed into. So it really helps you stay on track with your goals, particularly if you've got something you're doing on a regular basis. And I strongly suggest that a tool like that is something that's going to tend to keep you more on track than some of the more conventional ways that people use to track their goals. Now, in terms of contact management, again, you can share your contacts. I know in my iCloud setup, as soon as I add a contact on my iPhone or on my desktop or on my laptop or whatever device I'm using or my iPad, that gets inherited by everything. Another kind of really cool thing is when I come home, I tend to drop my cell phone in a very specific place. I get home, I go to a certain place, I empty all my pockets, including my phone. I don't like carrying my phone around with me. Well, that's not where my office is. My office is on a different floor from where I dump all that stuff. But here's a very cool thing. If my phone starts ringing, because it's connected via the iCloud connection, and I'm allowing it, I've given my desktop devices permission to interact with the phone in this way, I can answer the phone from my laptop, my desktop computer, or from my iPad. Any of the devices that I have associated with my phone can do that. So I can answer a phone call from my kids or from a client or from anybody else simply by clicking answer on a dialogue that pops up on my screen on my desktop computer, and it'll use whatever my connected microphone is and whatever speakers I have set up or my headphone if that happens to be what I'm using. So the seamlessness of it, the idea that I don't have to go running to find my phone when it's ringing, because odds are I'm within reach of something. I've usually at least got my laptop within reach of me, or I've got my iPad within reach of me, or I'm at my desk. So that makes it super easy, and it means that you're going to be missing fewer phone calls that could be very important depending on what you're doing, right? It's also good to be able to see who the person is who's calling, and you get that information on all of those platforms when you're doing it. Now, for those of you who are not Mac people, you're using a Windows machine, anything like that, you may be aware that within the last week, we had the folks from Microsoft and the folks from Apple do an intro of new stuff they're coming out with. Apple made a big point of talking about their laptops, and the Windows or the Microsoft folks made a point of talking about their new desktop Pro computer, Surface Pro, which I got to be honest, looks freaking amazing. It's ridiculously expensive. It's a $3,000 setup, but what it is it's basically a touch screen. It's a full-size regular display that is on a hinge that lets you then bring it down to sort of the angle of a drafting table so you can draw and do other kinds of things on it. So in terms of what you might want to do, and in terms of what you need, you do not need to spend $3,000 on a computer to get the features that I think you're going to need to be super efficient at whatever you're trying to do. And, this applies to whatever goals you have going on. Real estate, absolutely. I mean, I think these are all tools and all elements that could play into you being very effective, not letting things sort of go by unnoticed or get accidentally ignored. Lots of tools to support you pushing through with all of those things. But you really don't need to spend $3,000 for a computer to do that. Now, just to sort of lay out exactly what I have, I mean, I know I've listed off several different devices, and it may sound like I've got a lot of high-end stuff, but I really don't. I work off of a Mac Mini as my primary desktop computer, and I use that as It's the device that I use to record my show. It's the device I'm going to use to record the video elements that we're going to be doing here in the next few days. It is what I use to track all of my various real estate things going on, clients, escrows, and it has plenty of juice to do that. Now, that was not an expensive computer. It's under $1,000. Then you have to buy the monitor and keyboard and everything else separately. But even once you've done all of that, you're still pretty reasonably priced in terms of acquiring a brand new computer. Now, this I haven't had to replace this one. I think I'm on year 3 or 4 of this particular computer, and it's still going strong. So it's absolutely not something where you need to have the biggest and best. If you're not producing a podcast every day or you're not processing a ton of video, you absolutely don't need anything crazy. You can jump in and get yourself something that's going to work out just fine. Now, I happen to be using an iPhone 6S right now. I have no intention of going to the iPhone 7 because it doesn't have a headphone jack, and that makes no sense to me. I don't plan on updating to any of the new Mac laptops because they don't have a USB port on them, which makes no sense to me either. So I'm going to be happy with the tech I've got now for a while. And then I do have an iPad. I have a second generation iPad, so not even a brand spanking new iPad. But all of those various items kind of put together, I'm guessing with the age of everything, I'm trying to think what would be your grand total out of pocket for all of those toys. I guess maybe probably $2,500, probably something in that ballpark right now if you wanted to buy all of that stuff. Because again, this is all not the newest stuff. In fact, if you want to get into doing Mac stuff now, I would suggest that you go and purchase a 2015 Mac laptop because you'll still get the USB port. You won't get the little magical touchscreen strip that they've put onto the top of the keyboard. But I got to be honest, I'm not seeing a huge payoff for that. So this may be one of those rare opportunities where getting a Mac laptop could be a ridiculously amazing deal for you. And the truth is, if I wanted to, I could do everything I just described to you without having the Mac Mini included. In fact, for a while, I've been considering shrinking my footprint in terms of technology and just having the laptop, iPhone, and iPad as really what are my primary bits of technology, and perhaps not even really upgrading the desktop computer that when that time comes and just sticking with a laptop. But you could absolutely get all of that stuff done. So it would be good for you to check and see what the prices are since Apple just announced their brand new laptops. You can get a great deal on the old ones. So that might be something that you want to consider. All right. So that's just a quick rundown on the tech I'm using. If you don't have technology you've already adopted, I've probably kind of left you with the impression that the Mac is the way to go. I don't know of similar technology on the Windows side that will achieve everything I've just described, particularly in terms of doing something on one device and it gets inherited on all devices. So I tend to think that's the way to go for me, but I'm a little bit biased. I've been doing Mac stuff for quite a while. But it's and as I mentioned, it's also a great time in terms of not buying that latest and greatest Mac laptop is actually probably a better option. So, and it's a great time to buy since they're a whole lot cheaper than the current Mac laptop that just got announced last week. So we're going to go ahead and take a quick break right here, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about an article that came out from HousingWire talking about low interest rates, shifting demand, and the coming wave of new home buyers. And we'll see if we can figure out if that's a good thing or a bad thing. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Are you ready to jump in and start your search for your first investment property? Maybe you've decided that it's time to own your own home, or maybe you're ready to sell your home and move on to something new. No matter what your goal is, the Rebel Broker can help. That's right, aside from hosting this show, I am also the owner, broker of Whitelaw & Sons Real Estate Services right here in Silicon Valley. With over 25 years experience serving Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, San Martin, and Gilroy, I or one of my great agents can help you achieve your goals in real estate. So if you're ready to look into taking that next step towards achieving your real estate goals, point your browser at www.soldbyrobert.com. That's www.soldbyrobert.com and get in touch. Let me show you how I will earn your business and your respect. Again, that's www.soldbyrobert.com, or you can call me at 408-852-0525. California Bureau of Real Estate ID 00984-909.
Welcome back, everyone. We just had a quick little chat about tech, or at least sort of a brief review of the tech I use. We're going to go into a little bit more detail on the precise and exact tech that I actually use as a walkthrough process for the videos that I'm going to be producing here in the next couple of weeks. So stay tuned for that. Obviously, when those become ready, I'll announce those on this show. And if you're not subscribed to the YouTube channel, you might want to do that. You can find a link to that at the website at therebelbroker.com. There's a little palette of icons on the right, and one of them looks like the YouTube icon, and it's not to trick you. It's actually going to be a link to the YouTube channel. So if you'd like to go over there and subscribe to that, you'll get an email update when I post a new video. Right now, all of the shows automatically get posted to YouTube as well. So if you would prefer to not get those messages, we can just leave you off of that, and you can just take your cue from here, because whenever there's some new video posted, that'll clearly get posted there. However, one great way to get a notice when a new video is posted that's just very specific to this show, to Real Estate Realities, I'd suggest you go ahead and join the Rebel Underground, because that's going to be probably a place where we're going to see a little bit more discussion of those types of things, and also additional content that's really going to only be available to folks who are in the Rebel Underground. And to participate there, just text the word Rebel Broker to the number 44222, follow the prompts, and you will be set up to join the Rebel Underground. Let's go ahead and jump in and discuss this article from HousingWire. I thought it was a little bit interesting, and I'm not entirely sure if everything that they're talking about here is necessarily a good thing. Now, this was a gathering on Wednesday last week on the 7th floor of the Newseum in Washington, D.C. CoreLogic's chief economist, Frank Nothaft, told the crowd of housing insiders that anyone waiting for any dramatic shift in housing, interest rates, or otherwise is likely to be left waiting. So it's interesting to see his takeaway from that. He was talking about Data, Demand, and Demographics, a symposium on housing finance presented by the Urban Institute and CoreLogic. And he's actually saying that what we're about to hit is sort of a new normal. And I'm not 100% sure I buy that on every level, but I figured it'd be worth our time to review his main points. His new normal means interest rates will be staying low, well below 5% for the next several years, amid shift demographics bringing new home buyers to the market. I'm not 100% sure I'm on board with that assumption. Now, as we already know, the Fed raising or lowering interest rates doesn't really have the direct effect on lending that we tend to associate with it. So when the Fed raised interest rates a quarter of a point last year, we saw a brief increase, which we anticipated on this show. We warned you that you would see right on its heels a very small increase, but then we actually saw interest rates within just a couple of weeks drop back down below what they had been before the increase from the Fed. The reason for this is because of two things. One, interest rates that you get for a mortgage are linked more to 10-year Treasury notes than anything else. If you want to try to get an insight into what your interest rates are going to be for your mortgage, you want to look more at 10-year Treasuries than you want to look at what the Fed's doing. That doesn't mean there's an exact one-to-one. It doesn't mean if treasuries go one direction 10 points, that the interest rate's going to go that direction 10 points. It simply means that if you see treasuries go up, you're likely going to expect to see interest rates go up. So that's just the most proximal thing, and it's not going to happen at exactly the same time. Usually, lending rates are going to trail by a little bit, but it's an indicator, right? It's a hint of what's to come. So that's one thing. So then you have to start getting into a little bit more of a complicated thing. My problem with this comment, I think, is that there's too much of this that is being looked at strictly from a housing perspective, because other things that will increase interest rates are things like inflation. Also, if we start to see a situation where there is a huge demand for lending, now there's not a huge demand for lending right now because it's being held back by the low supply. You can't write loans on homes that aren't for sale. So, if we start to see a big rush on people getting loans, well, that'd be another thing that would work towards that. But in order to do that, we have to deal with the supply situation. So his claim that I don't think we need to worry about interest rates in the near term, I think is true. I think trying to project out 5 years isn't a realistic expectation, because remember what that number really is in the end is what banks feel comfortable expecting as a rate of return on their money. And if things start going nuts in other parts of the world, if Deutsche Bank totally takes a dump in Europe, right? That's not just an isolated to Europe type of thing. That absolutely is something that's going to affect us. There's a lot of weird stuff that's flinging around out there. So I think saying with certainty that for the next X number of years, we're going to see interest rates below 5% isn't necessarily true. I think if everything sort of stays status quo, yeah, I think that's a relatively fair thing to say. Even if the Fed raises their rate, I think it's still reasonable for us to be able to say that might be the case. But I don't think I'd go with a level of certainty that they're saying here. He says, I think mortgage rates are going to be with us for a long period of time. The expectation in capital markets is no rate change from the Federal Open Markets Committee today. We may see an increase in federal funds rate in December. He added that Wednesday's FOMC announcement could provide more of an indication of the willingness of the FOMC members, that's the Federal Open Markets Committee, members to increase rates before the year is out. But again, he's making that assumption that those rates are what most influence mortgage rates, and that's not the proximal number to look at. He says, I think we'll see rates rise from dirt cheap to a very low level as we move into next year, still remaining below 4% all through next year. We're evolving into a new era in mortgage rates. I would tend to agree with that too. It wouldn't surprise me if we see rates continue to be below 4% for the next year and beyond. Again, I still think there's enough uncertainty in other things going on economically that's not. I wouldn't assume that that's absolutely going to stay the same. If you believe that all these other things that are going on, whether you're talking about the derivatives or you're talking about credit default swaps that are now become more popular, or all of these things that are happening that tend to feed into a marketplace that causes a little bit of panic on the part of lenders, and panic equals higher rates, right? The higher rates equals greater security for lenders. So if you believe, if you've observed what I've observed, and you believe even a little bit of the stuff I've talked about that's concerning, that seems to be laying a path towards more crazy stuff, then you might not want to assume that interest rates are going to stay where they are for anything longer than a year. I'd be willing to put a stake in the ground for the next year, but really not beyond that. Let's see. He also projects 4 other trends that will emerge over the next several years that will shape housing's new normal. Chief among those is a shift in household composition and a change in demographics as more millennials approach home buying age. So here we are. This is another one of the, and remember, we've had both sides of this argument, that the millennials are holding back, the millennials are making decisions, and sometimes from the exact same pundits, that millennials are staying in place, they're not planning to buy, or they're planning to buy, but if they want to buy, they're only going to buy the home that they know they can stay in for a decade or more. Now the whole theory is that millennials are willing to settle. It blew me away. The exact same journalist who had published an article 4 months ago about how millennials weren't going to go anywhere because they're absolutely holding out for that right house that's going to last them a decade, is now saying that millennials are willing to settle. And maybe that's based on new data. The article sure didn't sound like that. They were talking as if this had been their opinion forever. But again, I think it comes down to worrying less about whether or not these folks are millennials and simply looking at what's the layout of the economic ground for them. And sure, I guess when you do that, you can generally group those folks into the millennials simply because so many of them have a great deal of education related debt and that sort of thing. He presented a chart during this presentation that highlighted the difference between the largest age cohort in the U.S. population, ages 24 and 25, and the average age of the first-time home buyer, which is 31. According to him, millennial buyers are coming, and they're coming relatively soon. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's pretend this is going to happen. And his data may be right. But what does that mean for the marketplace? Now, if we were in a position where we had tons of inventory and homes weren't selling, I'd be the first one to celebrate and say, yay, let's go. Let's get these folks in houses. Prices are good. They're going to get a good deal. It's not where we are, though, by and large. What we've seen is a big jump in the number of rentals that are out there, particularly in the Silicon Valley area, but not in terms of single-family residentials or condos or townhomes. So where are these folks going to buy? What these folks equal is an increase in competition for the existing pool of homes. So that doesn't mean a healthier real estate market. It means a market where what we're paying today is going to be considered cheap a year from now, assuming that the millennials start jumping in at the rate that he indicates. Now, here's why I don't think it's going to happen. Simply because the market won't allow it to be a decision the millennials are going to make. The exact same things that kept millennials out of the buying seat over the last year, 2 years, all those circumstances, all the money related stuff are going to be exactly in play over the next year. Are they going to want to buy? Yeah, they are. But in areas like where I am, their best option is going to be to rent because that's where all the new construction has gone. It's not going to be to move on from the current rental situation. It's going to be to move to a different rental situation because the place where prices are actually going to look like they're a little softer next year isn't going to be the single family residential marketplace. It's going to be the apartment rental marketplace. I've mentioned before all the various things I've seen getting built here in the Bay Area. If you drive along the 85 freeway in the southern end of Silicon Valley as it heads towards the 101 freeway, both sides of the freeway lined with brand spanking new apartments. I saw one of those apartments hanging up banners with incentives for a free first month. That's insane. But that's what I saw when I was driving through there just 2 days ago. There's another brand new apartment complex being built right off the 101 freeway in Sunnyvale. It's gigantic. That's where all of these options are going to be available. And when someone is simply doing the math of what it takes them to live every single month, they are not there. And you know what? Here's what'll happen. We'll see in that first and second quarter of next year. Let's pretend these millennials do come out. Let's pretend he's right, that the buyers who are millennials are in fact coming. They will come, they will see, they will make reasonable offers and be unwilling to participate in the crazy ramp up. A very small subset might be, but then they'll decide, screw this. I am not going into this much debt for this house because they're already averse to that. These are folks who've seen what happened before. They know how much debt they're currently saddled with based on their college education. All the things that everyone assigns to the millennials is still going on. So I just don't see their rational decision being, let's jump in and bid all this stuff way, way up. So what you'll end up seeing is more of a push towards these folks going towards where the affordable housing is. And that's not going to be a house they buy. That's going to be an apartment that they rent. So for folks currently in these areas that have rental properties, I see there's a possibility of folks renting that single family residential home may see some pressure from apartments, but there is such a distance in terms of desirability between apartment living and house living. I think the worst case scenario for landlords in my area is they don't raise the rent as much over the next year, simply because so much rental housing has been created over the last year and so much is yet to be done. So there is an awful lot that's going to hit the market just as we enter the big real estate market next year in that first quarter. And I think that's going to be a very interesting thing to watch. Now, granted, that is it's super local. That's very local observations, right? That is ground truth for me where I am. You're going to need to look and see where you are. This may also equal millennials deciding to be far more mobile than previous generations. As I said, the numbers still indicate that 33% of the people who live in my area in Silicon Valley want to get out. So it might be something where the millennials, some reasonable amount of them say, you know what, the market here's nuts. Screw this whole buy in the next county over or the next city over and then commute. I'm going to look for a job that's in a place where housing is far less expensive. And it wouldn't surprise me if that absolutely happens. So then it becomes a situation where how do you take advantage of that? Well, look at your local areas and find out where you're seeing more folks migrating from areas like mine. Now, you don't have to focus just on Northern California or Silicon Valley. You can take a look at these other areas that have ridiculous real estate prices. And there's usually plenty of Google data about this. We've talked about it actually in an earlier show this year. Where are those folks going? The folks that are leaving these areas, what are the cities they're tending to move to? I know Silicon Valley has a big contingent of folks who are moving to Seattle and Portland and Austin and those types of areas. Some of the places that have already made our list of places reaching up to being super high priced themselves. But there are smaller migrations, and it really depends on what your local community has to offer that I think dictates that. So you could benefit from this, but I would look for indications of some migration on the part of some of these folks who are just tired of paying as much as they're forced to for some of this property. Now I'm going to go ahead and post to Pinterest this one chart titled "Large Demographic Tailwind has Arrived." I get where they're going with. They're showing you basically a bulge in the demographics of the number of people in population that are in a certain age group that are likely going to hit and start wanting to buy. And that's all well and good, and I get it. I get where they're going with it, but I'm just not convinced that that's going to equal huge number of buyers, at least in an area like mine. It's going to equal huge numbers of renters who are renting longer and perhaps holding out for that right property, but they're not going to be willing to pay a ridiculous price for it. I don't think they're going to jump on that crazy escalator that just keeps pushing prices to ridiculously higher and higher levels. All right. Let's see here. He also pointed out the shift in demographics as to where the new buyers are coming from outside of the coming wave of millennials. According to Northaft, over the next 10 years, 3/4 of new households will be minority headed. And I'm not really sure what that has as an effect. And I live in what tends to be a pretty eclectic ethnically marketplace. So I'm not really sure. I guess from a cultural standpoint, right? That when we were talking about feng shui the other day, the breakdown they give is among the 117 million households in 2015, 68% of those were white. 13% were Hispanic, 12% were Black, 7% were Asian. For the next 10 years reference, 2015 to 2025, the household formation will shift minorities as 40% of the share of household growth during that time period will be from Hispanics, while 24% will come from whites and 18% will come from each Blacks and Asians. So there may be differences in terms of what folks are looking for, but these are still folks out to buy a home. And I've represented the whole rainbow in terms of ethnic backgrounds. And granted, I've encountered some things like the feng shui thing or some of those other types of things that some folks are interested in. But by and large, that doesn't really play into it for me in terms of trying to figure out competition related items, right? So this is really, in terms of figuring out who the buyer pool is, it's a great way, as we mentioned the other day, to come up with marketing things that might culturally be attractive to folks from different groups, different cultural groups. But in terms of actually figuring out from, if you're on that other side, if you're in the buyer side looking into a purchase, that becomes less of a concern for you. So maybe it's not something you really need to horribly worry about. Northaft also cited the excellent performance of mortgages since the crisis as the new credit profile, which brings much lower credit risk than before the crisis. And I find it interesting that they bring that up because we've talked about how that's not quite the story, is it? The story is, yes, when lending was made more strict, when we actually stopped letting people do 110% loans, when we stopped letting people do stated income, when we actually did rational lending that was based on the actual creditworthiness of the person borrowing, things got better. Now, you can think back to how tight things were, and things got a little bit so tight that it was unreasonable tight. But things loosened up a little bit. They remained rational in terms of what they're expecting in terms of creditworthiness of borrowers. But what have we seen recently? We've seen a reduction in the reliability of the credit score, right? Including and considering things that really don't tell you anything about the creditworthiness of the person who's making the loan. We're starting to see more vehicles that are a little bit more nuts. The broadening of the 3% loan without any insurance, the 2% loan, the 1% loan, the 0% loan. So while I agree that the performance of mortgages has been great. Over the last year and a half, we've taken steps that start creating mortgages that are just as risky as the ones we were signing up for from 1999 to 2006. So I'm not so sure I would look at that and say, I feel good about that. Now, of course, I'm going to have a link to this article in the show notes. If you want to go over to therebelbroker.com, you can check those out. As always, if you are consuming this show on iTunes, please head on over and give it a review and some stars, whatever tool you're using. Anytime you give that sort of interactive feedback on whatever platform you're using to consume the show, you're helping the show. Whatever algorithm gets used to calculate the ranking of a show, it's that engagement that's great. So anytime you can take a minute to do that, I would profoundly appreciate it because you're helping the show grow. All right, folks, thanks again for listening. I will talk to y'all next time.